Can you hear us? Okay. So this is Laure Badufle, and she was born in South Korea in 1984. She was adopted to France in 1985, and I'm right in thinking you knew about your Korean heritage from a very young age, but thought of yourself as white. I really resonate with that. You grew up in the countryside in France, and I think a lot of inter-country adoptees will find that they've grown up in very white rural areas in general. I think it's important to mention that Laure has a website. It's called Rajata, and it's to help adoptees connect with themselves on a deeper level, and you use ritualistic yoga, coaching and art to help shed the feelings of inherent badness that comes with abandonment. And I think, like many of us, you're learning that you deserve to exist and deserve to take a space in this world, which we all struggle with. You have designed a bespoke program for adoptees, and you've called it Adoption Mastermind. And she can also be found on Instagram. So welcome, and thank you so much for this Q&A.
Thank you, Debbie.
This Q&A is basically for adoptees, really. It's talking about what it feels like to be an adoptee. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you is how does it feel to have your life portrayed on screen? And how did it happen? How did it come about?
Yeah. So as I said to a few of you already, it came out of friendship and coincidence because the director is a close friend, and he met with my Korean family twice, and that idea came from those circumstances. And to be honest, it's very funny because, you know, as an adoptee, there is always this question about taking your place in the world. May it be as a man, as a woman, with others, with our whiteness, with our indigenous parts. And for me it was the same, like I did struggle to take my place in this movie because I found that my involvement at the beginning was so big because we were working together with the movie director. I provided material for the script, although I didn't write the script. But then after, the contrast came because there were choices to be made in this movie, and he was the director, he was the one making decisions, and his artistic decisions, because he thought about whether this would be a fiction or this would be a documentary, whether I would play the role or it would be someone else. And in the end, his decision was to take someone else and to make it more like a fiction. And at that time, I really struggled to find my place there. I also had no knowledge about how to make a movie, about all the stakes, all the stakeholders, and also all the challenges to make a movie happen. And I know it's very difficult, and I know it requires a lot of skills, a lot of resilience. So yeah, I felt like I was so much involved at the beginning and so little at the end. Was it my responsibility? Was it also the reality of making mass media product? You have a lot of parameters to take into account. And how does it feel? First, there was a lot of excitement that for the first time of my life, someone understood. I felt he understood me. He understood the complexity of meeting the birth family, that it is not, most of the time, it is not a happy story. It is not the answers of our questions. It is, on the contrary, like a big tornado in your life. And you come out of that like completely confused about, you know, did I make a good decision to do this? What am I gonna make out of that? So yeah, that was when I saw them. When he told me about this idea, I was like, oh great, you can talk better than me because it's such a sensitive topic, and you probably have a better critical eyes and maybe more. You can say this in a subtle way than me. But then when the movie was on screen, then there was this kind of a trauma coming back to my face. Because even though it's a cinematographic adaptation, let's say, you know, like the scenes of the meeting with the family, the scene with the mother as well, all this really echoed into that original trauma. And I really want to insist about this, that you know, I discovered yoga in my 30s, and for me it was really eyes-opening, because in yoga there is a lot of focus about the body and the fact that the most sacred bond between humans is between the mother and the child. And when we are adopted, we break, well, that bond is broken forever. And as happy as as privileged we are to grow up, you know, in the best conditions, that void is there forever. And I'd like you to give yourself permission for this, you know. This is completely normal to feel super desperate about this, and yet we can live and make beautiful lives. I'm not sure I was talking about this. So yeah, watching this on screen, like the trauma was really harsh, but the shift came because this year, then I realized that I could take a part, like, okay, I wasn't part of the commercial, let's say, advertisement of it, but I could make those events that we are doing today, which makes sense because I know adoptees have a dual relationship with this, you know, those stories. Like we like to talk about it, we want to go, or we're afraid, we don't want to talk about it. And the fact that we organized this meeting tonight, the fact that maybe this organization met for the first or second time, it creates something that I really enjoy. And I think for me it was a way to take ownership back over this story, which became a beautiful, beautiful movie. But yet, that's the way for me to take place in this.
How do you feel? Because I know that none of the cast in the film were adoptees. None of them were intercountry adoptees. So do you think they portrayed being an intercountry adoptee accurately enough for you?
This has been a question they ask a lot to the director and the actress as well. I know they had to answer this question. I think on my side, the benefits of this is that, you know, they have skills that they had the skills about making a movie, about acting, and they put that distance, because when adoptees make movies, when it's autobiographical, it can be very dramatic, and already it's such an emotional topic, it can just be too much. And I found they managed to contain that very strong emotion. They managed to put it in a way where it's beautiful, like art cinema, and at the same time we talk about something, a very real pain, something very authentic. But it is always tension. It doesn't explode. It is always like contained, as maybe we do as adoptees. We kind of always contain ourselves, like we want to scream but we don't, and we smile instead, and we contain, and then sometimes we explode, of course, but we live in that constant balance between containing and exploding, maybe at least in my case. And I think the downside of it is, so there is one actress, the young one playing Lucy, who's an adoptee from South Korea, and yes, all the other ones are not adoptee. And I would say maybe for necessity of making a fiction and an attractive fiction, that the character was a bit reduced to that provocative side. And I can relate. This is a side that I exposed when I was younger, and I was struggling a lot with addictions. And when I was consuming products, let's say, I would have this very provocative attitude, and maybe some of you have as well, being, in that space. But most of the time, as an adoptee, I am a pleaser. I'm trying to fit and adapt to the needs and desire that I think the other have, and I forget myself completely. I forget about the needs, and then after I victimize, like, nobody thinks about me, but if I don't think first myself and express, how can others know? And I think that side of the pleaser, well, maybe all adoptees are not pleaser, but talking with adoptees, I know this is a very strong aspect that we have to deal with, and at the same time we have this intensity of emotions contained. Sometimes we're very sharp and we break relationships in one snap, or sometimes we just smile and say yes where we want to say no.
How has the response been from people who've seen the film, who are adoptees compared to non-adoptees? I know for myself, when I first watched this film, I found that the scene, because many people have described the character as being quite harsh, and I really don't understand and recognise and especially the scene where she meets the birth mother and she's crying, and it's almost like the mask has slipped and she can be herself and she can release all of those pent-up emotions that we carry inside us because she's waited a lifetime for that moment. So how has the response been from the audience members who've been adopted and who haven't been?
I think from the non-adoptees, there is a common idea that adoption is great, that we are saving children from poverty and we give them a chance, and adoptees should be grateful. That's something we hear often. And I think in this movie there's an effect of mass education, that adoption is a complex topic, and if you talk to an adoptee, please be a little bit careful, because you are going into a very moving field with full of minds everywhere. And I make this parallel of if you lost your family in a car accident and people would tell you how does it feel to go to the cemetery and go to the tomb, they wouldn't. It's a bit similar for us adoptees, and just to say, when someone tells us, like, did you meet your family, did you go back to the country, and do you speak the language, or do you feel more from this or this nationality or this, that's sensitive. And I think the movie shows that there's a lot of, behind the simple question, there's a lot of background that we carry with us. And for the adoptees, I think there is, some of them reach out to the team and also to me to say, thank you for raising this voice where I can identify and where I feel seen, and also maybe I understand a bit of my patterns and behaviors, something like this. And yeah, there is this aspect of the character being, having personality and having borderline behaviors, let's say. And I know some of you were shocked by it. Sorry for this look. No, but what I want to say is, I do believe it's a reality. I do believe a lot of the adoptees are, struggling with this relationship with the feminine, their feminine and the masculine, using as a power over others or using as a way to honor ourselves, our ancestors, and who we are. And it's easy to numb yourself with alcohol, relationships, sex or love, rather than facing your own emotions. So that's something which is normal, and of course there's a lot, from outside you can have a lot of, you can have a lot of prejudice about it, but from the point of view of understanding, it's just suffering, I guess, just way to cope with suffering, survival. Yeah.
So I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience then, please. Have you got any questions? Anyone?
Hi.
Microphone's coming now.
Hi, Laure. Thank you for ruining my makeup tonight. For me, the pieces that I feel aren't seen out in the world are those moments in the rooms with people in Holt or Hammonds in the film. Was there something you wanted to get out there, or Davey witnessed as that process of how we're treated, how we're guarded when it comes to search? Was there something, a message that you wanted to be sort of seen, or something that Davey witnessed in that?
Yeah, so Hammond is the substitute name of a Holt. Holt was had a big part in this massive adoption from Korea. They didn't want to be part of the movie, but Davey recreated exactly the same office as a Holt, so some of you might recognize. And the person playing at the end, the facilitator for the meeting with the birth mother, is actually the person we met at Holt together when I asked for a copy of my dossier, the file. I think Devi was very intrigued about the process of those telegram, you know, because there's a fight right now about the privacy law, like Korea wants to protect the parents or family from, you know, a scandal. And on the other hand, you have those adoptees who come and knock on the door, like looking for information. But I also think it's interesting that for a lot of us, we were like not looking for, we were like, no, I'm not interested into my birth country, my parents, and then suddenly out of the blue one day we just go there, you know? And I think this sudden attitude is also as Freddie, you know, she wasn't expecting anything. She felt a bit like others were pushing her to meet her family, and she ended up meeting her father in those ways. And also to show that it's a bit of a fight, you know, if you want to find your parents, sometimes there's no information, or there's those rules, they are so stupid, well, they feel so stupid. And I remember being very upset with those rules, where I tried to contact my mother. They had information, but, you know, they were filtering. And I remember feeling this was so unfair, you know, that they had the information, but they didn't want to give it over.
I think that's one of the things we find as adoptees in general, is that we feel a sense of that this is our information, this is our identifying information, and we have a right to that information. And whether you're an inter-country adoptee or a domestic adoptee, that we're always having to fight to get our paperwork or to make contact with birth family. It's an ongoing process for so many of us. Do we have any more questions?
Thank you for the movie, and really enjoyed it. Is there somehow, I got curious now after, is there a return to Paris from Seoul after all the story and the plans of the producer or of you, Laura, or is it like, because the, you know, success has been amazing, and just curious if there have been any talks or any plans?
I cannot speak in the name of Devi, but yeah, I think there's something interesting there about the, we saw, and it was a choice of him to show only Korea and the relationship with the birth country and parents. A little mention about the adoptive parents in the Skype. I think this whole part is really interesting to explore, you know, in many ways. I don't think Devi is going there for the moment, but who knows, you know. Also, I've been trying to organize, we organize those type of events with adoptive families in France. And because it's a big topic for them, like, you know, how do you support your child who is in this search, and, you know, without being too intrusive, but at the same being supportive. So I don't know, I think it's a very interesting topic.
I think not many adoptees get support from adoptive parents, and I know a number of adoptees wish to do the tracing process without informing the adoptive parents as well. But the thing I find refreshing about this film is it's not all happy fairy tale endings like Long Lost Family would have us believe. Any more questions?
Thank you very much for a fantastic film. I'm very interested. I'm an adoptee myself. I grew up in Sweden. Always been encouraged to find, you know, my mum always talked about my heritage and the culture and so on. So I've been very fortunate in that sense. But I've not been able to trace my biological family. So I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a very personal question. I understand you met both your birth parents, and how is that experience in terms of finding that missing part of yourself? Did it fulfill the hole to a certain degree, or?
I think the question we might want is not to get new parents, because we already have, and it's already worked to have two parents. But it's more about like why, you know, the reason why of our separation. And there are different narratives we can find, you know, like the file we get from our adoptive parents and their adoption agency might be different from the file in the other, you know, institutions. So for me it was a why, you know, it was a why, because I think I felt, even if I was adopted at a young age, I felt there was a lot of fight, you know, around my adoption before in Korea. And that was the case, you know, when I met my mother and father, I understood all the fight. And you know, it's funny because I was so obsessed about Korea. I was trying to be this Korean girl I would never be. I was trying to live, learn the language, and it was never enough. And I was still not feeling legitimate to be Korean, you know. And now I found, a bit like in the movie at the end, you know, the end is not in Korea or France, it's in another country with yoga. But the yoga I discovered in London, you know, because I lived in London, and that's where I discovered Kundalini yoga. Shamanism, I did it in Peru, but I think with those traditions, I found myself more on my Korean side than anywhere else. And today, as I explained to a few people here, there's a possibility as a Korean adoptee to get your Korean passport and name without knowing your birth parents. And for me, it's important because it's. I've heard so many times you're not Korean because you don't speak the language or you were not grown there. And before I thought to be Korean, I have to make a relationship with my birth parents. Then I can be Korean, and I can say I'm Korean. I have the stamp. And then it didn't go well with my parents. You know, I was trained to force something. I was not accepting my father the way he was, and accepting the story, the past as it was. And today I don't have a relationship with them. And with this passport and also work around arts, because I have this project about my imaginary twin, you know, creating memories about who I would have become if I were in Korea. And I found much more answers. So what I want to say is, like, yes, birth family search and reunion can be ways to get some answers, but yet you will never know the answers. It's always, someone will tell you something, but is it really true? You'll never know. And in the end, there are a lot of creative ways to connect to that part of you, which where you only need yourself, you know, and it's all inside. It doesn't depend on someone else.
And I think also, as an inter-country adoptee and having searched for my birth mother and found her, that a lot of it was about, as you just rightly say, it's why did you give me away? And it's also just wanting to see who I look like. When you've grown up without any genetic mirroring, you just want to know where you get your features from. And it's a very, very powerful emotion when you reunite with a birth parent. But you're right, it doesn't answer all of the questions because you go searching for the answers, and what you don't expect is people who've had their own lives and their own traumas, and they're trying to deal with those. Do we have any more questions?
Are you still playing the piano?
Yes, I do. I have this ambiguous relationship with piano. Either I play like many hours a day or I don't play at all. But as a teenager, it was really cathartic. You know, it was a way to pour my emotion there. I had no words to say. I was feeling very misunderstood, and I was playing very loud to bother annoy my mom, and you know. But yeah, in the movie, it is a red line, right? In the movie, the music, the relationship with music, and at the end, playing your own melody.
I think we had another question somewhere here.
First of all, thank you very much. I recognize the courage you might require to pluck up to be in this place and to make a narrative out of that. I was really intrigued when you said you were brought up in a very white dominant part, remote part of France, knowing that you might be white. Yet, as the story unfolds, you said you kind of arrived in Korea by surprise. Something of that sort of pull that leads you that search. I really wanted to know more about that sort of inherent longing and searching where you might be belonging. That's the first question, if I may. That also really intrigued by the kind of narrative, how you started of the sight reading, something that require a fear to confront, and how you kind of finish the song at the last scene by being able to stand, sitting by piano and playing. and whether that sort of marriage indicates your turning of the journey in a way of your facing the fear, having gone through not finding mother in motherland, but met her, but it wasn't quite the way we thought it might be. So those are two questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the first question is, what is about the how to find belongings, or no?
So this inherits the longing.
The longing.
Pull to something that might be your place of belonging. You know, often people talk about being refugee in your motherland or your own land when you're adoptee or in your mourning, and there was that strong sense, as if you, even though you said you landed there by surprise, you know, what seeming sort of a coincidence, seemed to have a much stronger pull to open the story.
Okay, so the attraction, right?
As you're growing up in a very white dominant area,
Yeah.
how you kind of may have negotiated the differences or not.
Okay, and the second question about the music. I'm not too sure I understand well the first question, but I guess I was really attracted by traveling alone from the young age. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I didn't go first to Korea. And yeah, the feeling of alienation in Korea is very strong. And I do believe as adoptees we are like refugees, because we are like political refugees in our own countries. And we are not, they're okay with us there, but there's a lot of taboo as well on this topic here, in the country who send a lot of babies. And about piano, so again, it would be more a question from the director, for the director, but we discussed about this a bit, and he had this idea. He thought a lot about the last scene. He was like, I'm not too sure, what to do and where, and he thought first to do it in France, but then he didn't feel right. But I think there's something about the acceptance of imperfection, because she starts to play and she makes mistakes and then she continues, and there's something about, I guess, acceptance of the mother. Before in the movie, she always reacts, when there's something doesn't please her about the mother. She starts to dance or provoke, and there, instead of leaving, she wants to leave the hotel, but then she sits, instead. She sits and she feels the pain of, that void. But then, she starts to play music. So, and I find this very, very beautiful, beautiful conclusion. I think I grew along that movie as well on a personal level, and because I didn't want to see the movie before it was finished, and I saw it at Cannes, and it was echoing a lot into thoughts I had about. There's a lot of, I think, in me and a lot of adoptees, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of want to control, and in that humility of accepting whatever comes, life in life terms, and there is some relief, Yeah.
I think it also comes from a place of not feeling very out of control when you're born, Do we have another question? I think there's somebody here. I think we've got time for one more after that.
Hi there, thank you very much for that film. That was very interesting, and thank you KK for bringing me over here. Have you been able to accept your parents' decision truly, and are you also thankful perhaps for what has come of it? Have you been able to see it and give thanks to this situation?
You talk about the Korean parents or the French parents?
Your biological parents.
Oh yeah, okay. So there's, I also mentioned to a few of you a tool that really helped me, which is called Family Constellations, and it's working either you can work with a therapist or in a group and invoke like the wisdom that we all have and the power of the ancestors, or you call it whatever you want. And in that ritual, I was able to recognize the power of my ancestors, the Korean one. They're very strong, they're very resilient. They had very annoying neighbors, so they had to fight all the time. And even today, they are separated. We don't even know why they're separated. But yeah, it's a strong blood, you know. And I recognize that yeah, I have healthy genes and a lot of energy coming from that ancestors. But at the same time, there's a lot of wounds, you know, there. And there's a lot of wounds in the feminine, also in the masculine. And to be able to differentiate that this is not my wound, this is the wound of my mother or my father. And yet, I honor them that through them life was given, I can have this experience. But yeah, I had a lot of anger for them when I didn't know, because I had that narration that my mom married another man, and that's why I was given for adoption. And that was not true, but it was a narration that also, it's easy to put the blame on women, you know. Birth mother, they are the ones to blame, like, you know. But there are actually a lot of reasons. And I know this is very painful for them as well, you know. It must be very painful to live in like this.
Yeah, one more question. Back there. This lady here with a... Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. I have a question about I have a question about the language side of things. I'm not sure how much you got involved in the screenwriting of this film, but I wonder, because it got multiple languages. So is it like you got write every lines in Korean or English or French, and you got English translations, and that goes along with it. And then my second question is about the belongings and otherness. That so growing up as a Korean ethnicity in France, and then returned to Korea, but not speaking the language. But your self-identity is sort of French. So I wondered, like, in which culture you felt like more belonging, or feel more of the otherness from the cultures. Thank you.
Okay, the first question is like why there are so many languages in the movie, or
not why. So I wonder what's the script like.
Because
it got so many
the language
languages
in the script.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And also it's screened, released on international film festivals.
Yeah.
So I wondered how's the language?
Oh yeah, how is it managed?
Out in the script.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And then where do I belong the most? I feel I belong the most. Okay. I think the script is written in those languages, and then there are subtitles. So here you had English subtitle for French and Korean, and in France you had French subtitle for Korean and English, you know. That's how it was handled. And it is true that when you go to your birth country, you're navigating through different languages, and none of them actually, you know, you don't really know which one to use, and none of them really work. That's quite, that's adding to the confusion, you know, of going back. And belonging. I've met different communities as I started this path towards peace, more peace inside. I could always relate a bit, and at the same time I couldn't completely relate. I think belonging is an ability to be authentic, and yet to stay in connection with others. So it doesn't depend on country. Like, I guess, yeah, as transracial adoptees, we were thrown into this world with no real sense of belonging. So we have to compose, and maybe we can relate where there's communities creating new type of identities, or, you know, that's why we have this thirst and curiosity to look for new places, to look for people who have different backgrounds, and yeah. So I think it's a beautiful strength we have as well, you know, this thirst, and we search, and we don't know what we search, but we search very hard. Yeah, but no, and I also can relate a lot with the adoptee community right now. Yeah, of course with the Korean one, because we have a lot of similarities, and also with the broader adoptee community, where I really feel I'm in my right space right now. Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know much about the adoptee community, part of an organisation called the Adult Adoptee Movement, and you can find our website to learn more. I'm also part of an organisation called Intercountry Adoptee Voices, and you'll be able to read stories about other intercountry adoptees, also like Laure. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much.